Welcome, my dark-hearted friends. I am Dr. Dead, and you've stumbled into the shadows of SinisterMedia HD, where the veil between the real and the unreal is torn apart, thread by bloody thread. Tonight, we dive into one of the most bone-chilling legends in American folklore, a story whispered in the wind and etched in the trees. This isn't just a campfire tale. This is the cursed history of the Blair Witch, a darkness born from pain, vengeance, and centuries of fear. So, lock your doors, dim your lights, and keep your eyes on the edge of the screen. Because once you step into these woods, you might never come out again.
Chapter 1. The Witch of Blair. The town of Blair, Maryland, was born from hardship and superstition. Founded in 1769 by a handful of English and Irish settlers, it was a rough and isolated place, buried deep in the Black Hills forest. The settlers feared the wilderness surrounding them, not just for the wolves and bears that prowled in the shadows, but for something older, something they couldn't name. They spoke often of dark spirits and angry ghosts that lingered in the deep woods. It was a world where every sickness was a curse, every shadow a threat. Among these settlers lived Elly Kedward, a woman who never quite fit in. A widow from Ireland, she carried with her strange remedies and a reputation for witchcraft. Her skill with herbs and her ability to ease fever and infection made her useful, but also feared. Children whispered that she painted with blood. Adults, desperate for cures, took her potions in silence. The winter of 1785 was brutal, colder than any the settlers could remember. Crops had failed, game was scarce, and hunger gnawed at the edges of every household. When several children accused Elly of drawing blood from them during her treatments, fear erupted into hysteria. In a town where superstition was law, the word witch was enough to condemn her. The trial of Elly Kedward. There was no formal trial, no judge, no jury. The elders of Blair gathered in the center of town, a crowd of shivering settlers surrounding them. Torches flickered in the frozen wind as the accusations were read aloud. "She took my boy's hand and pricked him with a needle," shouted one mother, clutching her son to her chest. "She's no healer. She's a devil." Elly, bound at the wrists, protested in her thick Irish brogue. "I've done no harm. The blood draws out the fever, it heals." But no one would listen. In their minds, her strange ways were proof enough of witchcraft. That night, the men of the town dragged her into the Black Hills forest. The snow crunched under their boots, and the black trees loomed like sentinels. They tied Elly to a large oak tree, wrapping rope tightly around her wrists and ankles. She screamed curses at them, her breath freezing in the air. "Mark me well," she shouted as they left her. "You'll all suffer for this. I'll see your children taken, your bones ground to dust." By morning, she was gone. Whether she froze to death or escaped, no one knew. All that remained were the ropes, frayed and hanging from the tree. A single trail of blood led into the forest, vanishing into the snow. The disappearances began. At first, life returned to normal. The town believed it had rid itself of evil. But within weeks, strange things began to happen. The children who accused Elly of witchcraft started to vanish one by one. At first, the town thought they had simply wandered too far into the woods. Then animals were found. Deer, foxes, even dogs, skinned and hanging from trees in grotesque displays. By the spring thaw, fear gripped the town. Families began to leave Blair, abandoning their homes and fields. In the journal of Mary Abrams, one of the last settlers to leave, she wrote, March 7, 1786. "The forest is not quiet anymore. At night, we hear the cries of children, though none are left. I saw a shape by the creek, a woman, but her skin was pale as bone and her eyes glowed like fireflies. My husband says we must leave before she takes us too." Within a year, Blair was a ghost town. Cabins rotted under the weight of snow, and vines began to reclaim the land. The name Blair was spoken only in hushed tones, a warning for those who traveled too close to the Black Hills. The legend takes root. Stories of the Blair Witch spread through nearby villages. Traders and travelers spoke of strange markings carved into trees, of piles of stones stacked like graves, of stick figures hanging from branches as if warning intruders away. Hunters claimed they saw a gaunt figure moving silently through the forest, her limbs twisted, her hair matted with dirt. Some believed Elly Kedward had not died at all, that she had made a pact with something dark and ancient in the forest. Others said she had become something far worse than human. By the early 1800s, the legend of the Blair Witch had taken on a life of its own. Parents warned their children not to wander near the woods, lest the witch snatch them. Travelers avoided the Black Hills, speaking of sudden cold winds, strange laughter, and a feeling of being watched. Fragments of evidence. A few artifacts from this time still survive, though historians debate their authenticity. Among them is a crude wooden charm, a stick figure bound with twine and smeared with what appears to be dried blood. It was found near the ruins of the old Blair settlement in 1809. Another is a letter, supposedly written by a priest who visited Blair in 1786, which reads, "I felt a heaviness upon entering the woods, as if the air itself bore witness to some great sin. The trees groaned like mourners, and I knew in my heart that evil had taken root here. This place must be forsaken." These pieces, whether real or fabricated, only served to deepen the legend. By the dawn of the 19th century, Blair had vanished from maps. The area would be resettled decades later under a new name, Burkittsville, but the land never forgot. Hunters still avoided certain parts of the Black Hills, and some swore they heard faint cries on moonless nights. The story of Elly Kedward became more than just a tale, it became a warning. Chapter 2. The Curse Awakens. By the mid-1800s, time had softened the memory of Blair's curse. The forest remained silent, its dark history buried beneath the whispers of the past. When settlers returned to the area, they gave it a new name, Burkittsville, believing that a fresh start and a new name would erase the shadows that lingered there. They were wrong. The death of Eileen Treacle, 1825. In the summer of 1825, a young girl named Eileen Treacle met a fate that would resurrect the legend of the Blair Witch. Eileen was just 10 years old, full of curiosity and energy. She often played near Tappy East Creek, a shallow, winding stream that cut through the Black Hills like a scar. On an unusually warm day in August, Eileen went with a group of friends to wade in the creek. What they witnessed that day would haunt them forever. According to their testimony, the water turned cold and dark. They claimed that Eileen, standing in the middle of the creek, suddenly screamed. One boy said he saw a white hand, like bone, reaching up from the water. Another girl claimed Eileen was pulled under like something grabbed her feet. The children ran for help, but when they returned with adults, Eileen was gone. The water was still, as if nothing had happened. But for 13 days afterward, the creek was said to run with an oily, black residue. Villagers found bundles of sticks, tied together with strange knots, floating downstream. The townspeople whispered the name that had been buried for years, Elly Kedward. Robin Weaver and the Shadow House, 1886. By the late 1800s, Burkittsville was a quiet but thriving village. The events of Eileen's death were remembered, but spoken of only in whispers. Many dismissed it as superstition, nothing more than the fears of frightened children. But in 1886, the legend returned with blood-chilling force. A little girl named Robin Weaver, just 8 years old, went missing while playing near the edge of the Black Hills. Her mother, frantic with worry, told neighbors that Robin had spoken of an old woman with black eyes who had been calling her name from the woods at night. No one took it seriously until the girl vanished. A search party of 7 men was formed. They entered the woods at dawn, carrying lanterns, rifles, and rope. Days passed with no sign of either the girl or the men. Then, on the 5th day, Robin returned. She was barefoot, her dress torn and covered in mud. She was unharmed but confused. When asked where she had been, she said softly, "I followed the old woman. She took me to a house made of shadows. She told me to wait there until she was ready. The walls whispered and the floor was alive. I wanted to leave, but the door wouldn't open." When the townsfolk returned to the woods to find the search party, they made a horrifying discovery at Coffin Rock, a large, flat boulder deep in the forest. The 7 men were dead, stripped naked and disemboweled. Their bodies were arranged in a ritualistic pattern, their intestines draped like garlands across the rock. Strange symbols, carved into their skin, glistened in the sunlight. By the time the sheriff gathered enough men to retrieve the bodies, they were gone. No blood, no remains, not even footprints were left behind. the town's descent into fear. The horror of Coffin Rock was never forgotten. From that day forward, the people of Burkittsville avoided the forest. Hunting parties refused to cross into the Black Hills. Farmers reported that their cattle would not graze near the tree-line. Children who wandered too close claimed they saw figures standing among the trees, watching them. There are accounts from this time period of strange events that seem to echo the old stories of Blair. Margaret Brody, a schoolteacher, claimed that the woods came alive when the sun set. She wrote in her diary, October 12, 1890, "I hear laughter at night, children's laughter, though none are near. My candlelight flickers as if the air is breathing. Something scratched at my door last night. It wasn't a man, for no man could make such a sound. It was claws. I believe the witch is real." Others began reporting signs of strange witchcraft around their homes. Stick figures hanging from trees, piles of stones stacked like graves, and symbols carved into barn doors. The Black-Eyed Woman. By the turn of the century, the legend of the Black-Eyed Woman was whispered to every child in Burkittsville. Described as a tall, gaunt figure with hair like wet rope and eyes as black as tar, she was said to drift silently between the trees, always watching. Some claimed that those who saw her were doomed to die or disappear. Others said she would appear to travelers at dusk, standing at the edge of the forest, pointing toward the dark. The town priest, Father Jonas Hackett, spoke openly about her in one sermon, warning that the devil's work walked in the woods. He died just weeks later, found hanging from a tree on the outskirts of town. His eyes had been gouged out, and a crude stick figure was found nailed to his chest. Survivor accounts. Not all encounters with the Blair Witch were fatal, but few who survived were willing to speak of it. One such account came from Thomas Aiken, a hunter who wandered too far into the forest in 1901. He was missing for 3 days before he returned, ragged and shaking. He claimed he had been led in circles by whispers in the trees. She was there, he told the sheriff. I saw her in the shadows, just standing there, watching me. I don't know how I got out. I think she let me go, but I don't think I'm free. Not really. Thomas Aiken never hunted again. Within a year, he vanished from his home, leaving behind nothing but a crude, blood-smeared symbol carved into his wall, a circle with an X through it. The forest remains hungry. By the early 1900s, the people of Burkittsville lived in constant fear of the Black Hills. No one ventured there alone. Hikers and wanderers sometimes went missing, their last known location always near the tree-line. The legend of Elly Kedward, the Blair Witch, had evolved into something larger and darker. She was no longer just a vengeful spirit of a wronged woman. The forest itself had become her body, her hunting ground. As one old farmer put it in 1903, she's not just a ghost. She's the woods. She's the wind in the trees. If you go in there, you're hers. Chapter 3. Rustin Parr's Madness. The 20th century brought modern conveniences to Burkittsville, electricity, paved roads, and a growing sense of progress. But none of it could erase the shadow that hung over the Black Hills. The forest remained a place of dread, avoided even by the most fearless hunters. And in the late 1940s, the name Rustin Parr became forever linked to the Blair Witch's curse. The Hermit of the Black Hills. Rustin Parr was an outcast even before the horrors began. Born in 1903 to a poor family on the outskirts of Burkittsville, he grew up quiet, awkward, and prone to fits of isolation. Neighbors said he was strange, a boy who preferred wandering the woods to playing with other children. By his teenage years, he had dropped out of school and taken up a solitary life in the hills, building a crude cabin in the heart of the Black Hills forest. For years, Parr lived like a ghost. He trapped animals, hunted game, and sold pelts in town, but rarely spoke to anyone. Those who encountered him claimed he was hollow-eyed and muttered to himself as if speaking to someone unseen. The disappearances began. In the summer of 1940, children began to vanish from Burkittsville. At first, it was dismissed as coincidence. Perhaps they had run away or gotten lost. But when the 8th child disappeared, panic gripped the town. Parents kept their children indoors. The local sheriff, Charles Garrison, organized nightly patrols, but no trace of the missing was ever found. Whispers of the Blair Witch returned, stronger than ever. Some claimed they saw strange lights deep in the forest, or heard the sound of children crying late at night. Hunters reported finding crude stick figures hanging from trees, swaying in the wind as though alive. the arrest of Rustin Parr. The nightmare ended, or so they thought, on May 25, 1941, when Rustin Parr walked into the Burkittsville general store. He was filthy, gaunt, and barefoot, his clothes torn and stained with dirt. "I'm finished," he said in a voice that was almost a whisper. "She's done with me." The store owner, bewildered, asked him what he meant. Parr only repeated, "I'm finished now. I'm finally finished." Authorities followed Parr to his cabin, deep in the Black Hills. What they found there chilled them to the core. In shallow graves behind the cabin were the remains of 7 missing children, each bearing strange symbols carved into their skin. The 8th child, Kyle Brody, was found alive, terrified and malnourished. He told deputies, "The witch told Rustin to do it. She told him to hurt us." Inside the cabin, the sheriff found disturbing evidence. Drawings of stick figures smeared on the walls, piles of stones arranged in circles, and a dark, blood-stained corner where Kyle said the children had been forced to stand so the witch wouldn't look at them. Parr's chilling confession. At his trial, Rustin Parr confessed without hesitation. His voice was flat and emotionless, as though he were merely stating facts. "She came to me in the woods. A woman, but not a woman. Her face was like a skull, her eyes black as night. She told me I had to take them, one by one. She wanted their souls. She told me to kill them, but only when the other child was facing the wall. She said she didn't want them watching. She said I had to obey, or she'd make me hurt worse." When asked who she was, Parr simply replied, "The witch. She lives in the woods. She's always been there. You can feel her in your bones." The townsfolk were horrified. Though many dismissed Parr's talk of the Blair Witch as the ravings of a madman, others believed every word. After all, the legend had haunted Burkittsville for over a century. The execution. Rustin Parr was hanged on November 22, 1941. Witnesses to his execution claimed that he smiled faintly as the noose tightened around his neck. Some said they heard him whisper, "I'll be with her soon," just before the trapdoor opened. His cabin was burned to the ground by angry townsfolk, but many claimed the land itself remained cursed. Those who dared to enter the ruins said they felt a heavy presence, as if someone were watching from the shadows. The last words of Kyle Brody. Kyle Brody, the sole survivor, was never the same. Traumatized and withdrawn, he often spoke of the Blair Witch as though she were real. He told reporters and investigators that she had stood in the corner of the cabin, watching Rustin kill the others. In one chilling interview with the local paper, Kyle whispered, "She's still there. She doesn't leave. She made Rustin do it, and now she's waiting for more. She's waiting for me." Kyle grew into a deeply troubled man. He spent much of his life in psychiatric care, plagued by nightmares and paranoia. In 1971, he took his own life in an asylum. His final note, scribbled on the back of a paper napkin, read, "She wants me back. I see her in the dark." The legend deepens. The Rustin Parr murders became a grim reminder that the Blair Witch myth was far from dead. Paranormal investigators and thrill-seekers began visiting Burkittsville, drawn by tales of hauntings and strange phenomena in the Black Hills forest. Some claimed they heard whispers at night. Others found strange wooden totems hanging from trees, just like the ones found at Parr's cabin. By the 1980s, the legend had evolved into a full-blown urban myth. Parents warned their children never to enter the forest alone. Teenagers dared each other to spend a night near the ruins of the cabin. The witch, or whatever dark presence lingered there, seemed to feed on fear. A growing obsession. Local historian Frank Goodwin wrote in 1985, "The Blair Witch is not just a ghost story. It is a pattern of violence stretching back over 2 centuries. From Elly Kedward to Eileen Treacle, Robin Weaver, and Rustin Parr, the events are too numerous and too horrific to be mere coincidence. Something in those woods is alive, and it is not human." Chapter 4. The Vanishing of Heather, Mike, and Josh. By the early 1990s, the Blair Witch legend was firmly entrenched in Burkittsville's history. To the locals, it was more than just an eerie story told around campfires. It was a warning, a reminder that the Black Hills forest was cursed and that something malevolent lurked within its shadows. But to outsiders, the legend had become something else, a curiosity, a strange piece of folklore that begged to be explored. In October of 1994, 3 student filmmakers decided to do just that. Their names were Heather Donahue, Michael Williams, and Joshua Leonard. Armed with 2 cameras, a sound recorder, and a backpack full of supplies, they set out to create a documentary about the Blair Witch myth, one that would capture interviews, historical sites, and possibly even evidence of the supernatural. They never came back. The filmmaker's journey. Heather, the leader of the group, was a strong-willed film student with a fascination for dark history. Mike and Josh were her fellow film students and friends, drawn along by her enthusiasm. Their plan was simple: interview the locals of Burkittsville about the Blair Witch legend, hike into the Black Hills to find Coffin Rock and the ruins of Rustin Parr's cabin, and return with enough material to craft a compelling documentary. Their early footage, recovered a year later, shows smiling faces and casual banter as they entered the woods. They filmed interviews with townsfolk, many of whom gave chilling accounts of the Blair Witch. One woman, an elderly recluse named Mary Brown, claimed she had seen a strange woman with hair like horse's mane whose feet didn't touch the ground. Another man told them about Rustin Parr and his gruesome murders. Others warned them not to go too deep into the woods, muttering that the forest doesn't let you leave if it doesn't want to. Heather laughed these warnings off. "It's just a story," she said to the camera. "We're here to get the truth." The first signs of trouble. The group set out into the woods on October 21st, planning to camp overnight near Coffin Rock. The first day went well. They found landmarks, captured eerie shots of the forest, and even joked around a campfire. But that night, things began to change. On their second morning, they awoke to find 3 small piles of stones arranged outside their tents, carefully stacked, as though someone had been watching them while they slept. Heather filmed them nervously, muttering, "This wasn't here last night. Someone's screwing with us." As they pressed deeper into the woods, their map became less useful. The forest seemed to twist and turn unnaturally, leading them in circles. By nightfall, tension had begun to rise. Their laughter had turned to arguments, and fear crept into their voices. The stick figures. On their third day, the filmmakers stumbled upon a clearing filled with dozens of crude stick figures hanging from trees. Each one was tied with twine, shaped into a human form, some with odd runes carved into the bark nearby. The sight rattled them deeply. Josh whispered, "This isn't just a prank. This is something else." That night, strange sounds surrounded their campsite, branches snapping, distant footsteps, and what sounded like children laughing faintly in the dark. Their cameras caught frantic footage of them shining flashlights into the trees, but nothing was there. The disappearance of Josh. By the 4th day, they were lost and exhausted. The forest seemed to mock them. No matter which way they turned, they ended up back at the same clearing with the stick figures. Food was running low, tempers flared, and paranoia set in. On the 5th morning, Josh was gone. His sleeping bag was empty. Heather and Mike searched desperately, screaming his name, but all they found was a torn piece of his shirt caught on a branch. That night, they heard him screaming in the distance, a guttural, pain-filled cry echoing through the trees. They followed the sound, but found nothing. The next morning, Heather discovered a bundle of sticks wrapped in fabric outside their tent. When she unwrapped it, she found blood, teeth, and hair, pieces of Josh. She didn't tell Mike. The final night, terrified and desperate, Heather and Mike tried to find a way out of the woods. They followed streams, marked trees, but nothing worked. On their final night, they heard Josh's voice calling them from deep within the forest. They followed the cries to a decrepit, abandoned house. Their cameras captured their frantic exploration of the house. The walls were covered with strange handprints, as if children had pressed their fingers into the grime. The floorboards creaked as they climbed to the upper level, searching for Josh. Suddenly, Mike's camera fell to the ground. The footage shows him rushing down to the basement, calling for Josh. Then, the camera turns to reveal him standing in the corner, his back to the room, perfectly still. Heather's voice, frantic and terrified, screams his name as she descends the stairs. The last seconds of footage show the camera dropping to the floor, and then, nothing. The discovery of the footage. For nearly a year, the families of Heather, Mike, and Josh searched for answers. Police combed the forest, but found no trace of the students. It wasn't until October 1995 that a hiker discovered a burlap sack buried beneath the old foundation of Rustin Parr's cabin. Inside were film reels, tapes, and equipment, all that remained of the trio. When the footage was reviewed, it shocked everyone. The images of the stick figures, The blood and the final moments in the house were so disturbing that many believed the film to be cursed. Some investigators claim the house shown in the footage shouldn't exist. The remains of Parr's cabin had been burned decades earlier. The legacy of fear. To this day, no trace of the 3 students has been found. Their disappearance remains one of the most chilling mysteries in Maryland's history. Some believe they became lost and died of exposure, their footage an eerie coincidence. Others believe they fell victim to something far darker, something that has haunted the Black Hills for centuries. In the years since, hikers and campers continue to report strange experiences in the woods around Burkittsville. Some have gone missing. Others claim to have seen stick figures hanging from branches or heard faint whispers calling their names. The legend of the Blair Witch lives on, stronger than ever. Whether Elly Kedward truly became a spirit of vengeance, or whether the forest itself is cursed, no one knows. But the Black Hills remain a place of dread, a place where people vanish, where the trees seem to move, and where the past is never truly buried. Final words. In 2019, a local historian wrote, "The Blair Witch is not a story. It is a pattern. It is a hunger. It waits in silence, drawing the curious and the foolish into its grasp. And once you hear the whispers, you will never leave the woods the same. Perhaps it is best that we never know the full truth."
You've just heard the true nightmare of the Blair Witch. Do you believe it's just a story? Or do you think something still waits in the Black Hills forest? If your pulse is still pounding, subscribe to SinisterMedia HD for more tales that crawl under your skin and linger long after the lights go out. Check the description for links to 10 spine-chilling Amazon horror products that'll help you survive the next time you hear something whispering your name in the dark. Until next time, my friends, sleep with one eye open. Dr. Dead is signing off.